can tell that Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor to the President of the United States, is a man who squats to pee. Look at what they've done. They took the Houthi off the terror watch list. They took the Houthi off the list of designated terrorist organizations that Donald Trump did. Today, they're having to put them back on the list, except they don't want to technically do it because they don't want to be accused of reversing to a Trump position. So they will re-sanction the group as a global terrorist organization, but won't put them on the terrorist organization list. So the Houthi will still be able to get visas. There will be no criminal penalty for supporting them. And U.S. banks will not be allowed to seize their funds. If they were on the terror list, they could. Just by sanctioning them, they can't, and they are a terror group. The Houthi are colonizers in Yemen, and they are slave traders. Now, this is hilarious, and you need to understand this. The Houthi literally are slave traders and own slaves. And the woke intersectionalists are siding with the Houthi because of the melanin in their skin. They're darker than the Israelis, so they must be the oppressed class of people. And the Houthi are literal slave owners. The Houthi enslave people in their communities. And there was actually a Palestinian, of course it was a Palestinian journalist, who were defending the Houthi, saying it's not all of them, it's not officially sanctioned, and the laws in Yemen prohibit slavery. The law prohibits slavery, but the Houthi own slaves, so they're also lawbreakers. They're literal, like, can you wrap your mind around this? You need to wrap your mind around this, that the Houthi are literal slave traders and owners. The Houthi own slaves. They have enslaved a population. No, they don't pick cotton, but they pick crops in the field. They do the watering of the plants. They tend to the people. They are forced against their will. They will be murdered if they don't. They are literal slave-owning populations that Jake Sullivan and the peace squatters of the Biden administration have turned a blind eye to for so long. The Houthi have been funded by Iran. They have engaged built missiles, acquired missiles and weapons. A group of naval vessels today were able to stop an Iranian vessel headed to Yemen to give them more missiles. They've hit multiple ships. They fired at the U.S. military. They fired missiles to target Israel, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. And what has this administration done? They have attacked them with press releases and hashtags. But let's step back further. They took the Houthi off the foreign terrorist organization designated list because there was a famine. And the Houthi, well, they may work their slaves harder. During the famine, they were short of food. They might eat the slaves. So we needed to take them off the terror list because we needed to give them supplies. And so we supplied them. And what did they do with the supplies? Well, they turned around and attacked us. The peace squatters in the Biden administration, they decided they needed to rethink Iran. So they allowed Iran to sell oil. We gave Iran access to their frozen bank accounts. And what did they do? They sent the money to Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah to murder a bunch of Jews. These guys, they're all academic. They don't actually live in the real world. They live in the world of refined debate and academic simulation. Let me read you from Wikipedia. Jacob Jeremiah Sullivan is an American attorney who serves as the United States National Security Advisor. He previously served as Director of Policy to Barack Obama, National Security Advisor to then Vice President Biden, and Deputy Chief of Staff to Secretary Hillary Clinton of the State Department. He served as a senior advisor to the U.S. federal government at the Iran nuclear negotiations and a senior policy advisor to Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. He was a visiting professor at Yale. So he left law school. He went to clerk for a judge. He then went to clerk for Stephen Breyer. He practiced law and he taught law. And then he worked for Amy Klobuchar, the senator who connected him to Hillary Clinton. Oh, he also worked for the Brookings Institution's president, Strobe Talbott, at the Yale Center for the Study of Globalization. Talbott was a Clinton administration foreign policy wonk. So, dude was a lawyer who clerked for some judges who went into politics and never left. No real world experience. And now he's advising the president of the United States. And what have they done? They have funded the Iranians who sent that money to Hamas to kill a bunch of Jews. They funded the Houthi, who are now firing missiles at the United States. They took the Houthi off the foreign terror list. They were loudly opposed to Donald Trump putting them on the terror list. They took them off. They did it. This is one of the things they did on the first day. This wasn't 6 months into the Biden administration. This was one of the first things they did to repudiate Trump. And now they're having to put him back on the list, but they can't bring themselves to admit Trump was right. So they're doing a different sort of designation as a global terror organization, but not on the actual terror list. So banks can't freeze their assets. We are run by an administration full of people from the nonprofit sector and careerists in government who have no real-world experience. They have produced an effective foreign policy that has led the world to the brink of war. Don't believe me. The United Kingdom's defense minister yesterday said we are in a pre-war phase. We have crises in Ukraine, a crisis that didn't exist when Trump was president. We have a crisis in the Korean Peninsula, a crisis that did not exist when Trump was president. North Korea moving to a war footing against South Korea. We have the situation with China and Taiwan, where this administration is bending over backwards to accommodate China. And now we've got a spreading war in the Middle East. This is Jake Sullivan and Joe Biden and their vision of the world. It's a very Jimmy Carter-esque vision of the world, which is not a surprise. Joe Biden is one of the few people in America who liked Jimmy Carter and his administration, and they wanted to rethink American foreign policy. They wanted to tie things to human rights. They degraded our relationship with Saudi Arabia. They allowed Iran to get footholds in portions of the Middle East by giving them money, thinking that if we talked to Iran differently, if we made kissy face with them, if we squatted to pee with them, maybe they would like us. And instead, what have they done? They've killed a bunch of Israelis, Jews around the world. They've fired ballistic missiles at American positions. They've armed the Houthi, who are firing on cargo vessels, disrupting global world trade. This is all the result of the Biden administration. You either lead or you do not lead. You don't squat to pee on the world stage, Joe Biden. That's what he's done. That's what Jake Sullivan's done. That's what this entire apparatus has done. They have regressed the world. They've made the world a more dangerous place. For all the bellyaching about Donald Trump and his team disrupting and destabilizing the world, Vladimir Putin wasn't in Ukraine, and Israel was at peace, and North Korea was not threatening to invade South Korea. And all they can do is they can fall back and, well, actually, Donald Trump really set the stage for this, and it's happening under our watch. We're 3 years in, and it just keeps getting worse. We're headed into a fourth year of this administration, and the academic elite who've never had a job in the real world think they know how to solve the problems of the real world. They've barely lived in the real world. Jake Sullivan will be lionized by the media because they're all in the same circle of jerks together, blinding each other in the bathroom. I have utter contempt for these people. Absolute, utter contempt for these people. How many Americans are going to die? Do you know we lost 2 Navy SEALs, it appears? Yeah. Have you heard this? 2 SEALs on this mission to disrupt this vessel sending arms to the Houthi. 2 SEALs have gone missing. We can't find them. It should have never come to this. It should have never come to this. And meanwhile, you've got the defense secretary who can just disappear for weeks on end without anybody knowing. This is absolute chaos in this administration. And our American media, if they weren't a bunch of men who squat to pee and weren't circling the wagons around Joe Biden to prevent Donald Trump from coming, they would cover this fairly and honestly, but they can't because they're all in this together. They're all in this together. This world is on the brink of war globally because of this administration. They have funded Iran. They've funded the terrorists. The blood is on their hands. We've lost apparently some Navy SEALs in this operation. It should have never come to this had they taken a strong stand first. Had they left the Houthi on the terror list, this would not have happened. But they had to come in and rethink everything that worked because for the value of rethinking it. And now you've got thousands of dead Jews. You've got the people in Gaza dead. You've got this entire situation, and it is on their heads. They will never be held accountable by the media because the media is in the same tribe defending them, scared to death of the second coming of Donald Trump. But just consider that they've had to undo their big hullabaloo celebration of giving justice to the Houthi. Why? Because it turns out Donald Trump was right, and Jake Sullivan and Joe Biden continue to be wrong.
Want to be on